discussions of music, healing, and consciousness with your hosts Chris Noble and Bill Perotzman. In today's episode, we're talking about music and long-term healing, especially from adverse childhood experiences, or ACE. Chris and I offer examples from our very early musical lives, unpack how music worked to help us, and describe the ways that this awareness grew into an intention and then a practice for our well-being. We offer several helpful ways that you can turn music into a tool for your own healing and support those with evidence from the neuroscience community that extends beyond the head-brain to the heart and soul of everyone's human experience. We think you'll be delighted with the opportunities you have to put music to work for your own good. We'll be talking about all that and much more, as always, in these open conversations here on Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness. So what were we going to talk about? So three, two, one. Let's try that brain reset again. The last time it didn't get us anywhere useful. Well, it did, but not where we want to go today.
Well, okay. You know what? I love what you sent me here today. So for those of you listening, Bill sent me an email about the adverse childhood experiences and how music essentially helped him, and he knows as well with my story, helped me basically survive some of the really tumultuous times in our childhood, teenagehood, young adolescence, and, well, of course, this expands into the rest of our lives. But today we want to focus a bit more on the earlier parts of our lives and how we've all gone through challenges, of course, as a human being. It's part of our story. It's part of our journey. But we encountered some amazing ways to help and heal and cope with the craziness, the tumultuousness, the massive racking of insecurities on your whole being growing up. And I mean, I think it's a brilliant thing to talk about. So thanks for sending that to me, Bill.
Oh yeah, thank you, Universe, for dropping. I forgot where I found it this morning, but it just hit me. And obviously, in our time period right now, we're dealing with things like the aftermath of the Buffalo shooting. There was somebody shot up a church here in California on Sunday. There's weird expressions of stuff going on, and according to the psychologist, basically it all tracks back to whatever happened to us in childhood. And we all have those experiences, right? And they stay with you. They're part of who I am, part of you are. Part of, if you're listening, is part of who you were. And the idea here is not to go out and wipe all that stuff away and just sort of, reset the slate. It's history. It happened. And it happened for a very important reason, which, as traumatic as it was for all of us many times, right, is necessary for bringing us to where we are today. And so I don't want to suggest in any way that we're going to talk about how to erase ACE, adverse childhood experiences. We're going to talk about the transformation that takes place even in the moment. Like Chris, both you and I have these childhood stories of music, how even in that moment the transformation takes place. But I'm still learning from all that stuff, from 40, 50 years ago. I'm still learning from all that stuff. So I anticipate it's going to continue. Why don't we just drop a couple of them in here? Just whatever comes to mind of how you found music minding you as a kid. And I'll think of one too.
Well, for me, I started playing the piano when I was 6 years old, which was basically grade 1, I believe. And that's kind of when I started to have a really hard time at school. And I'm sure lots of people can relate to times when they went to school and just didn't fit in, or felt so many different forms of pressure, trauma, aggression, violence, or just emotional violence or emotional manipulation. I mean, a million different things. We can all think of so many moments.
So many.
Or maybe it's hard to think of them because we've actually blocked so much of them out. I have some major gaps in my memory from childhood, because mostly from school, from just some pretty difficult experiences. But I remember it all kind of started for me around grade 1 onwards, and it just so happened that's when I started playing piano. And I would come home from school on any particular quite a lot of days. It was definitely in the majority. I would say most days of the week I would come home and just be feeling pretty run down, pretty beaten down by the world around me, which was my school at that point. and feeling very misunderstood, feeling not really um, valued as a person, and so many other things. But whatever I was feeling, I would just pour it into the piano. And for those listening, I had no idea what I was doing on this instrument. I didn't take lessons until maybe I was around 10, 11, or 12. I think closer to 12 years old is when I started actually taking piano lessons. So
Yeah, yeah.
I had about 5 or 6 years of just knocking around on this instrument, not knowing a damn thing about it. And I was just quite literally playing that instrument through my feelings. And I would just find different combinations of notes, that I loved how they felt, like the difference between like a major chord and a minor chord, and just little small things where like a nice melody, just I would just play the white keys on the piano. For those listening, if you've never played piano before, you can make beautiful little melodies and songs without having any background knowledge at all. Just play the white keys, simple, done. Or just play all the black keys. You're playing a scale at that point, and it's all going to sound good no matter what you do. And that's what I did. And I would find these different combinations, and I'd start kind of writing my own little, very simplistic, basic songs. And these songs helped me get through a lot of things. And I could just feel every day when I would sit at the piano and do this, I could just feel almost like a waterfall of emotion just coming out of me through my hands into the keys, and like the instrument itself almost transmuted all of this emotional energy from my physical body and my emotional body. And it made it, did it make everything perfect and okay? No, not necessarily. There's other things I had to start implementing into my life to make my life a bit more enjoyable. But my God, did it help me, and honestly make or break in certain situations, me like totally losing it?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it helped me immensely. I honestly don't know. Sometimes I've had moments where I look at music almost as a person, as an entity, and I just go like, I I love you so much. You have been there for me every step of the way, and I literally don't know if I'd be alive today if it wasn't for music. So it was essential to my upbringing.
We've got to unpack all of these stories because I listening to yours, mine's going to be pretty similar. I think if we can get to how that happened in a way that other people can take that and use,
Mm.
then we'll really have something valuable here. Because like you, music was the go-to place. My family had this emotional range of like, a half an inch.
Can
You know,
relate there.
and,
Yeah.
and you couldn't be anywhere outside of that was not right, right? You couldn't be sad or angry or scared, or you actually couldn't be too happy, you know, which explains why I love going to Disneyland, because Disneyland is free of emotional range. But that
Uh,
said, so I the more that I learned to play the piano, um, which was a total drag from when I started until around fifth grade. Uh, the more I began to question this strange disconnect between the allowable emotional sort of human range of my family and the vast range of emotions that are available in music. So, by the time that I was playing, Beethoven and Brahms and some of the big romantic composers and stuff like that, it was all sort of weird to me because I could get Mozart, right? I understood Mozart. He kind of fit within the range, and Bach too. Obviously, since then, I have a deeper understanding and appreciation of the emotional depth of Bach and Mozart. But it's hard to miss when you're playing Chopin or, Beethoven or Brahms and Rachmaninoff. It gets big.
mm.
And it just didn't make any sense to me why I could have these incredible experiences, emotional experiences within the music that were completely not even something I could discuss at the dinner table. It didn't make any sense. And I'm still living with that in a many different ways. But as a teenager, when you're going, wow, I can feel all this stuff, and there's no other resonance for this except the soundboard of my piano. Like nobody else gets this. You don't have language for it. I was in my 30s before I started to learn how to talk about emotions in English, let alone be able to understand others.
Mm.
But that was a huge sort of gap. The psychologist would say that my parents were emotionally unavailable. I wouldn't take it so far as to say that there was emotional abuse, but certainly that neglect that you feel is like, what do you do with your feelings? Like, who understands me? Who gets me? Right? I completely connect with you there, because in school it was the same way. There are very few people that have that emotional depth early in life or even as teenagers. Heck, I know adults have never had it, and they're
Yeah.
great people. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you are experiencing this vast range of emotion and there's nowhere to take that in terms of a human conversation, it feels very lonely and isolated. And I spent a good portion of my early life um, isolating sort of with intent, not feeling that there was safety in the world for being able to be this big emotionally, unless I was on stage.
Yeah.
And there I had the equipment to deal with it well, which explains, I guess, a lot of why I was somewhat successful in doing that. But the cost, so I'm still learning how to pay that cost in ways that are satisfying, especially in human relationships. Really difficult to, first of all, come to a point in your life, you look back and go, oh my gosh, that happened to me, right? That's when the lights started to come on. I was in my 30s before that happened. And then, fast forward another 30 years, still trying to figure it out. But isn't that the purpose? I mean, at the end of the day, people, right? We're all here to figure it out, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, for you and me, it's music, and how that integrates, in life in a way that is bigger than just us being okay, but sort of offering that as a gift to other people to come through the door and experience music at a deeper level, and how that works.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know if what I had qualified as adverse childhood experience, but we didn't have any diagnoses for anything back then, right? It wasn't like we had the DSM. What are we up to, 6 or something now? Maybe they had DSM-1.
It's like we can prescribe or not prescribe, but we diagnose everything now. We have a diagnosis for everything, and I think in a way it's, I guess, good to have language for it, but at the same time it can make it feel like, oh my God, I was this, I had ADHD. It's like, or I was just bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I had a very vibrant personality, and a very, I didn't like school is a great example of an institution that boxes you into a way of learning that maybe only 10% of people actually learn well from.
Oh, amen.
And so the rest of us are just sitting there being like, what in the heaven's name am I doing here?
Why am I here?
And like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Literally. So I was just like, I was living to get out of school every day. I was just like, get me out of here.
Seriously.
And so, so that's half of it was just me having to go somewhere 5 days of the week that I ultimately just despised for so many different reasons too. And sure, there were some nice aspects of it, but ultimately it was not a great experience for me. So, music was an incredible outlet. And I think for those listening, it's not just playing music. We've talked about this so many times in other episodes, where it's listening to music, of course, with intention. And man, did I just, as much as playing music helped, it was also just putting on my headphones and just drowning out the world in whatever I was needing to listen to at that time. And it was a huge range of different types of music. I found myself immersed in it, because I could get just as immersed in a movie as I could music, in a sense of like it created a whole environment around me, and I could just close my eyes and just go there. And I was totally using it as an escape, of course, but even though escaping from things we know now isn't the answer, it certainly helped a lot in my youth to at least have a place that I felt safe, and a place that I felt at least understood, and I could feel, like yourself, this wide range of emotions without being heavily judged
Yeah.
from a lot of different people.
Exactly. Or told to feel something else.
Yeah. Like what you're feeling isn't right,
Yeah. Like, why aren't you happy?
Yeah.
Well,
how much time do you have?
Exactly. Not that I had a response, but it's like that, somebody
Yeah.
comes along and say, so what's the problem? But immersion in that does something, I think, that neuroscience would agree with. I'll go out on a limb here, but I think that when you're in the musical space, even if that's background music, like as benign as it possibly can be, there's music in the background, something is able to reach into you and get to the subconscious part of you where the answers are. right? Not the analytical number crunching zeros and ones, grinded out bits and bytes, an analytical part of you, but the part that responds to intuition and inspiration, the part that is connected to empathy, like all the good stuff, all the part that makes human beings really human.
Human.
And music is always tickling that in some way. And by being immersed in that, you and I think, develop, so whether they're conscious or not, but practices of enjoying that, right?
Yeah.
And wanting to be there and being open to what happens when we're there. Because that can be scary for people. So if you go for the first time, say you go for hypnosis and you encounter the intuitive side of you for the first time, that can be a real shock. But if you've been minding it the way that Chris and I have, and whoever else is listening to music a lot, whoever has that stimulus of music is familiar with this. There's an easier way in. We've trained ourselves, I guess, in a way, but maybe training isn't the right thing, because it isn't like training.
I could say you in training,
Yeah, in training. That's
brain
it.
Brain entrainment. When you listen to binaural beats, like we actually are shifting our consciousness when we listen to music in that way.
Yeah, I mean, even if we're not aware of it, right? Even if it's just and think of what awareness happened. So did you have like a moment where you had the awareness and all of a sudden it started to make a little more sense?
Oh, certainly. I mean, it was probably a series of micro moments, right? That would build up.
Yeah.
And I would, maybe a little older, like hitting around maybe 12 years old or something, 13, maybe just the beginning of puberty and all that fun part of growing up too.
Great ride.
Oh yeah. And I think around then was really when I started to understand the depths that music can take you on an emotional side of things, and just really started to almost it's kind of like when you're first learning swimming and you're only in the shallow end, and then all of a sudden you finally like practice, you do everything you can do in the shallow end, and it's great, but then you eventually get to that point where you're like, okay, like what else is there? And then all of a sudden you can get into the deep end, you can dive deep, and there's so much more depth and so much more going on. And sure, it's a little more dangerous too, it's a little more scary, but it's also a lot more fun and a lot more invigorating. And that's kind of what it felt like for me. There was like a tipping point where music then all of a sudden just became like, oh my God, this is literally like limitless emotional exploration and support, and just almost like affirming my emotions too, like listening to songs that, like pop songs or any song that maybe lyrically can reaffirm what you're feeling, like a breakup song, love songs, or just angsty songs like I Hate the System or whatever, where you're just like, me too, I'm so glad I'm not the only one, and having that kind of camaraderie with a person you've never met, but you listen to their music and feel so connected. I would feel more connected to the musicians that I was listening to than most of the people around me in my actual life.
Just because, I felt that as well.
Yeah.
They were saying things that weren't said anywhere, certainly in my house, and rarely, but sometimes at school.
Yeah.
The school I was at was pretty straight-laced private school too. So, there's a lot that happens under the surface in a straight-laced organization.
Yeah.
But lyrics and music are one of the beautiful ways of being able to, well, I wouldn't say things that are unpopular, but to speak the truth.
Speak the truth is exactly it. Artists are the prophets. I've heard that used before, where it's like artists, in all senses, not just of course music. This all expands to all the art forms, but it's a way to communicate to people in a more abstract way these ideas, and these ideas can be pretty, like pretty forward thinking. They can be pretty. So many things, like some people say, like the Beatles helped bring down the Berlin Wall, like their music of revolution helped spark a whole movement. And that's because instead of just having someone getting up on a stage and yelling at you to think a certain way, through music, it's like it's such a different way of delivering the same message. And you can hand it to people on such an attractive platter.
I take it you're not a big fan of Wagnerian opera.
Well, it did influence all the film scores we listen to today. So
I went to see one. I had never been, And it was exactly what Chris just said, everybody. It was like somebody standing on the stage yelling at us.
I love a good opera. Don't get me wrong, but
I
some
know
of
I do too. And I've learned,
no.
I've taught myself how to appreciate that stuff. The first time, if you're going to opera for the first time, don't see like, Wagner, go see Mozart or something that's,
Yes, yeah.
it's like
Cool.
the first time you go to see a play, it's probably great that you go to see Shakespeare, but it takes a lot of homework. So see something easier.
So see something a little lighter first.
Yeah.
You know.
Start out slow and work your way up to Wagner, whatever. But this is so important because the wanting to consume music is a different sort of a mindset than listening to music.
Mm.
I was always amazed in school how hard it was for me to memorize things, but I could memorize music like right away.
Yeah.
Lyrics, chords, whatever, boom, done. And it's the same brain, but the engagement in music is so much more complete than just memorizing a list of facts, right? Because you've got everything there working on you emotionally in the music. There's a physical sense of hearing or experiencing the vibrations. Like
we also know music occupies a different part of the brain too.
Oh yeah,
through Alzheimer's and.
Well, you know what? And this is I almost went there, but I stepped away from it because of the whole left-right thing is sort of getting blown apart now.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
And they have physical evidence on this. So what Chris is saying is true. Is like we process music in a different place in the brain than other stuff. But the coolest thing, this comes from a book called Livewire. I think it might be Livewire. But the science on the brain is that if you remove some of it, the other part of it figures out how to do the same job.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So they have plenty of evidence. People like with a half lobotomy, they took out the left hemisphere or something. And the right hemisphere figures out how to catch everything the left used to do.
Wow.
Right. Wow. And this is cool to me because it means that the brain can adapt, like physically adapt. Yeah. Plasticity. And it does it well. I mean, it's not like you're disabled in any way by missing half your brain.
Which you would think you would.
Which you would think. But yeah, if you remove like the visual processor, then some other part of it figures out how to process visual. And it gets really weird because then you get to places where blind people riding bikes are a thing.
Yes.
Yes. So I never laugh anymore when I feel the braille on the drive-up ATM because it's quite possible. So this whole thing about how one part of the brain is assigned one job and that's all it ever does is starting to feel like even that is a little slippery. And perhaps in musicians, well, maybe just in listeners, more of there's a wider envelope into which sound falls. Mm. It's not just falling into the audible processor, it falls into the audible processor and the physical entrainment processor and the emotional sort of stimulator and the spiritual open-minded whatever connection to the intuitive. And I think that by doing it more, we strengthen those pathways.
I think too with music, it's hitting again our heart, and we know our heart is also a brain now.
Oh too. Yeah, heart math,
heart math, and brain heart coherence, and like the idea that the information now that we know that the heart has similar neural pathways as the brain.
Yeah,
and so when you think about emotion, and it always feels a lot of the time it's very much placed in your heart. I wonder if the sort of brain of the heart. Then also, that's why you're retaining things a lot easier sometimes with music. Or I was going to offer as well to those listening as well. I mean, this is a music podcast, so obviously we talk about music, but this really does expand into not just all the other arts, but I would argue anything that you're passionate about. When you're passionate about things, you just remember it better because you care more.
Yeah.
And you retain things better when you care about them, and you also know why you want to learn them. When you're just memorizing useless facts to regurgitate on a test and then never use again, where's the motivation?
Exactly.
So no wonder it's harder to remember because you're like, I don't care and I'm never going to use this again. So what's the point? You
Why
know,
do it? Yeah.
why do it? But when you're passionate about something, like you'll have a great memory of like, how to design maybe something architecturally because you care about it, and you might lose the blueprint, but remember the entire thing anyway because that's how your brilliant, passionate mind about woodworking or architecture works, right? So it's the same thing with music. It just that was the modality that for Bill and myself, was our passion and the thing that we saw and gravitated towards just because it just seemed like the coolest thing ever, and that's what we wanted to get to know and understand more. But I think it really can expand to anything that you really deeply care about.
Sure. I've met programmers who say the same thing about coding,
Right,
and
exactly.
surfers who say the same thing about surfing, right? It's that passion, that openness
Mm,
to engage with the process. Um, I guess I can tell a little bit of a story out of school. I won't. It isn't necessary to go too far into it, but I know surfing for my kid was how he dealt with ACE stuff,
mm.
and that's perfect. Why not? Find a passionate thing that connects you to reality, or to brings you close to who you are, and whatever that is, it's good.
Oh yeah, I can relate there too. With I think I had almost like a two-pronged approach, which was music, incredibly important for like the intuitive, emotional side
Right. Yes.
of my life, and then sports and athletics were the other side of like really getting more like physical, like being in the body and almost being in a meditative state when you're doing those sports because you have to focus. So you're one-minded a lot of the time when you're surfing, when you're playing hockey, when you're playing soccer, whatever it is. I love sports for that reason too, where it was just I got to turn off the rest of the crap going on in my life and just be like, well,
Yeah.
I got to focus on this game right now because this is to me right now super important because I'm passionate about it.
That practice of learning to bring attention is so vital. And like we were talking about a few minutes ago before we got onto the recording here, social media is so ADHD. It's like the scattershot of attention is,
Incredible.
the spotlight doesn't stop very long in any
Point
one
five point
place.
five seconds.
At 0.5 seconds, and then it moves,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But if you're someone who needs to focus, first of all, don't waste your time with social media. But having said that, if you're someone who needs to focus and you need a modality to help you bring you in, to slow you down and make you stop, there's lots of ways of doing that. Probably the most benign, most effective, and safest is to have a music practice.
Mm.
I'll just go out there on a limb and say it. I have seen this with other practices too. So, let's be honest. And art is a good place.
Yep.
Obviously, dancers have it made. So do singers, because they can carry their own music with them. You can sing and dance. You
Yep.
get the physical. You can make your own music, and you're in the real sweet spot. So
Mm-hmm.
go triple threat, people.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't. You don't have to be a triple threat person to do this. The runner's high, that's available in music too. Uh, there are ways to use music to get so completely physically drained and tired out that you'd be amazed that you can still stand.
Play the drums.
Play the drums, go to a hip hop class.
Mm.
Jazzercise, of course, aerobics, they're out there. Everybody uses music for that stuff these
Yep.
days.
Even hit or whatever those like
Yeah,
boxing
yeah,
beats and stuff or whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, this is a great journey of exploration. You're not stopped yet. You're not stuck.
Actually,
And
sorry, one thing I've noticed
yeah,
too with bringing in these ancient modalities, we talked about meditation and breath work in other episodes, and something I've been encountering recently, experiencing and being a part of the facilitation is breath work with music and adding in like
yeah,
really fun, dancey, groovy beats behind the breath work, and you're breathing, but it's so musical that every time you take a breath in and out, you feel like you're actually contributing to the percussion, and you're
yes,
like, it's so primal, it's so fun, and you don't have to have any musical background to just put on a specific breathwork track and groove to it, and you're like, oh my god, I'm getting oxygen, I'm doing breathwork, which we all know there's millions of benefits to that, but then the music behind it, you're like, oh yeah, and they're kind of half like dancing, half breathing, half, it's a really that one's a really powerful one I've been recently really enjoying too. There's so much you can do.
I'm so down with this, and the kinds of the world we live in right now is so amazing for musicians because there's functional music out there for all of this stuff. It takes a minute to find it, but once you understand that it's there and know how to look for it, you can do all kinds of things with music that nobody was thinking about doing, I don't know, 20 years ago at this level.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And they're whole composers. I mean, you know, a bunch of them, whole composers that do nothing but write, you know, like breathwork music or, you know, psychedelic trip music or whatever it is. And it's very specific. There's a ton of running music out there,
Yeah.
you know.
There's an amazing app. Brian Eno, famous like Grammy Award winning producer. He put together. I forget the name of this app. Maybe you know it, Bill, but it is brilliant. Basically, you basically you type in what activity you're doing. You could be running, you could be doing yoga, you could be doing breath work, as far as I know. But the app also does take into consideration when you're moving as well, because it's you know as everything does, reads your GPS and all that stuff, and it changes the speed, the BPM, the tempo of the music depending on what you're doing. It changes the mood of it depending on what you're doing. And so it's like this app that almost continuously creates music for the different activities, but also has like really, I think, beneficial frequencies, maybe some other things going on. But I listened to it and it was so interesting how it morphed and formed into the different exercises that I was doing with my friends at that time. And it was because it was Brian Eno, it sounded awesome.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting.
I just looked it up, generative.com, and there's apps for Apple and Android devices. But yeah, I mean, do that. Calm is out there. There's a bunch of these different apps. I'm not a big fan of using apps for holistic human stuff.
But it's a great gateway for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. It's the gateway because once you learn to practice,
then you get rid of the app.
Yes, exactly. It's like that dating app that, you know, you've seen all the commercials for that, the one that you want to go away.
Yeah, it's designed to be deleted, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So do that. And we can do this now. I mean, we didn't have this technology, 30 years ago, 20 years ago? It's pretty new stuff. And the acceptance of it is universal. I mean, I don't know anybody out there who's complaining about Brian Eno's app for adaptive music for everything.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right? It's like, go, people. We can do this now, right? There's no need to suffer from your ACE symptoms or whatever they might be. I mean, clearly, if that's happening to you, get help for that.
Well, it's happening to everyone on some level, right? Like we can't ignore the fact that we've all had it's you know, I've been hearing a lot of things with, you know, trauma in general, because it's like you don't want to give your trauma too much attention either. It's like you don't want to ignore it, you don't want to suppress it. We know all the negative ramifications of that, obviously.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I feel like in this new age of a lot of healing modalities and things coming out to heal, some of us go on the extreme of the other side, and it's all about healing, 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 healing. And then you actually end up bringing so much attention to the trauma that it's questionable whether you're actually just exacerbating the trauma more by also giving it all this power and being like, this is this deep wound that's like destroying my life right now. I'm like, is it, or are you making it do that because you're telling yourself that it's doing that? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
There's a bit of it's like with everything, it's a balancing act, right?
Oh, it is. And, you know, I get what you're saying, because there's a certain sort of a status that goes along with having a double diagnosis, you know, and it's not a status you want, believe me, people.
No.
But moving through that, so the way that post-traumatic stress disorder, which is still the way it's listed in the DSM, the research on it says it's more like post-traumatic growth. And that the traumatic moment is there to spark us into doing something else. It's like it's the energy the brain needs to make a change. But holding on to the trauma is not the purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And stuffing the trauma is not the purpose. And trying to manage the symptoms is not the purpose. The purpose is to go through the rabbit hole. Right. And as you do that, things change. But you got to have a practice for doing that, right? Whether your practice is music or drugs or whatever the practice is that takes you forward, it's a decent practice as opposed to a practice that keeps you stuck.
Wow.
You know, and hanging on to your diagnoses is, you know, not, unfortunately for all of the people who are getting disability right now, based on that, this is a catch-22. It's really tough because, you know, who wants to be disabled by their issues if there's healing available?
You know, it's like sometimes it's great to just cash in on the disabilities when you can, because here's the thing, and I'm saying this because it's like you don't want to take advantage of it when there's other people that need it, but when you do need it, I actually qualified for PTSD disability compensation for my government here in Canada. And although the program actually got dissolved like almost right after I qualified for it, which was lucky for me, I still got to get it, but then they got rid of it. It was great because I put it all into like 11 therapy sessions and some sound therapy sessions,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
those were instrumental in me getting, not only getting through the PTSD, but like you said, growing from it and evolving from it. And it was a really traumatic event that didn't become something that was my big trauma that was holding me back. It was actually something that propelled me forward
hmm,
in a lot of ways, but it was also helpful to get a little compensation from that. So that's when the diagnosis is like, okay, cool, diagnose me, but I'm not going to wear that label like it's actually
yes,
me. I'm writing
yes,
it down on this form so I can get a little money so that I can go into therapy and I can get all these things right now that I
which
otherwise
helps,
couldn't
right?
afford. It helps so much.
And that's skillful use, as far as I can say. That's really skillful use. But like taking a lifetime disability when you're 25 and never ever changing, you know, whatever it was that messed you up that way. Um, we all have our different paths. So blessings to you. If that's you, blessings to you.
Hmm.
And I'm glad you're still with us, because a lot of people just take the exit right away when it gets tough, and
Oh
I,
yeah.
I've been there, maybe 3 times in my life. I've seriously thought the suicide was the best way out,
It's
but
understandable,
it's,
the crazy world we live in.
there's an insanity, right? And I mean, all you have to do is look around, look at who gets elected, for example. Um, is that a reflection of, or could it be a reflection of our adverse childhood experiences? That we pick somebody who's that familiar, I don't know. I'm spitballing here.
I mean, everything's a reflection in a sense, and I think it's also how everything that the way we move through our life and perceive things is in a way affected by our reality of deep, from childhood onwards,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
it's constantly shaping and forming our perception of everything, but at the same time, today, tomorrow, you can wake up and everything can change, everything.
Oh yeah.
And so there's
Everything that
like,
you thought was the complete package, the way it was supposed to be, one prick and the balloon is blown up. And
yep, quantum leaps, always possible. So that's the thing. That's like I try not to. It's so important to recognize the things that are causing us lots of dis-ease and lots of hurt and pain and suffering, but at the same time, also opening up to that fact that like it could change tomorrow for anybody, and I mean on any level,
oh
even if
yeah.
you've got physical horrible things going on like cancers or whatnot, even that can change overnight, be gone. And I've heard so many stories of this. All you even have to do is go onto like Dr. Joe Dispenza's website and read his case studies of
Yeah.
people that have done his meditations and have cured, tumors, cancers, disabilities, blindness,
Yeah.
or even crazier things like people who do these past life regressions and do these really deep hypnosis regressions into other timelines, which most people would roll their eyes at even the concept of that, whether or not you think it's true. The result is some of these people literally, I mean, one of the cases was they cured their blindness, another person cured their cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, these are big, big, big things. And because these traumas that we latch onto, and when we latch onto them and they become a defining part of our story, not that we're conscious of it most of the time, a lot of the time it's subconscious, but it's there, that can literally manifest into these really horrendous physical things. And I would argue that most of the problems we have with our physical body all stem from emotional turmoils that we just have yet to work through and grow from, not necessarily heal, but to grow from, which I really like how you said that, Bill.
I grew up in a religion that was about spiritual healing, and the kind of things that happened are remarkable. You have to think, whoa, is that possible? Obviously, it's possible.
Yeah.
And it's more and more prevalent today. You mentioned Joe Dispenza. There's so many people who have benefited from the change of mind, maybe,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that results in better health. And gosh, I love the work that Esther Hicks is doing around the law of attraction and the movie The Secret, just offering people an option. where there wasn't one before. And the potential for being able to live that option fully. I mean, to accept that healing, whatever it is, to accept the change that comes along with it. Wow, we're at a place that is happening so much in so many ways. So I was going to ask, when did you sort of develop a music practice? Not just practicing the notes, but do you remember the point in your life where you realized that it was something bigger than just making music?
You know, that's a great question, Bill. It's like, I don't know if I was consciously aware that I created my own music practice, because I did have a music practice well outside of just learning the instrument and getting better at the instrument. I definitely in my teenage years, I would just be playing music always for this feeling of joy, this feeling of expansion, this feeling of you come back from a really hard day of work or school and you're feeling heavy. I think we can all kind of relate to that. Whatever the emotions are, it's heavy. You're feeling tired. You're feeling run down. And I would just have almost always, like, the go-to thing for me would be go into my music room and probably turn on other people's music on the speakers
Yeah,
and
yeah,
play to that, or actually plug in my mic and just do karaoke time and sing to it, and or sometimes dance to it, or whatever it is, but just feeling those songs, the songs that you just need to hear that day, like, that just speak to whatever you're going through perfectly, and you feel all of it. And like, sometimes I'd break down into tears, sometimes I'd be laughing. It would just be expressed in so many different ways, but I would always go into my music room and find the songs that I needed to express. Sometimes it was me going on the piano and creating something new. Sometimes I needed to just be really, really creative in that moment and let it out. But it was always going into the music room and connecting and plugging into it and unplugging from my life. And
yeah.
that was kind of the practice, but it wasn't, something how you've gone, how you have this whole modality of making that a practice for people. I didn't have the conscious awareness of that, I think, till honestly much more recently.
Yeah, me too. It didn't, I knew what was happening, but making it a how to one, two,
Yeah,
three kind of thing that would work for people other than myself, more recent, like last 10 years or so on
right.
that. But watching it happen repeatedly for so many other people. So when did I start doing my own practice of music, like in a therapeutic way
Mm,
or an inspirational way, like you're describing, not actually making it, but taking a step back and allowing music that I need to find me. And
hmm.
um, I don't know if I've got a defining moment for that. You know,
I don't think you have to, but like, do you know roughly when, like, what moment in your life where it started to happen here and there, and kind of?
I was really conscious of that when I um, was working on my music degree. I have a bachelor's in music. It's not a master's. People say you get a degree. It sounds like a master's, but it's not. I don't want to teach, so I didn't get a master's in music.
Mm,
But when I was concertedly working on this, I realized that there were two things I had to do. And one of them was what my professors wanted. I needed to play a certain number of songs. They had to be from, like this organized way of this is the degree track and this is what your recital is going to look like and all that. And I knew that I had to do that and it was okay. But the other thing that I had to do was my way, right? And so I convinced the professors to give me a sort of a double recital where I could do what I do the way that it feels closest to the bone for me, and then do a second recital that was what they needed to have done for academic reasons. And they're like, well, that sounds like a lot of work. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can do this. you know, and it was a pile of work, but it was like you were saying, it's the work you have the passion for. And it doesn't feel like work when you're doing that. And both performances were fine, but I think that was the moment where I realized that there was a sort of a duality here in music itself, and that my job was to help bring that duality closer to being the singularity that is me, and how I approach music and do things. And that started me on a conscious awareness, which turned into a practice. So that was what, 1998, 99, not that long ago. And being aware of it that clearly for the first time is probably the biggest benefit, I think, of having done that music program, you know?
I wonder if those listening too have had moments where you hear a song for the first time and it just brings you somewhere so profound, so deep,
Yeah.
so moved in such a it's such an incredible way, whether it's to tears, to joy, to whatever, or takes you to a whole other environment maybe, or to a place in your past or something like that. And like that ability that music has, and especially when it's in like the first time you hear something so magical, it's a great example of it's such an amazing tool that if we can just harp on, so we got a lot of things that I think we want people to take away from this podcast, but
Oh,
I think one
yeah.
of the big ones, certainly with this episode, is that this is an amazing tool that we all have access to. Music is free to listen to for almost anyone in the world, and we got to use it. We've got a lot going on this planet, a lot to look forward to, but of course a lot of challenges as well. We gotta overcome and collectively come together to overcome. And it's gonna be every day. We're gonna encounter a lot of challenges. And what can we do in these times? Well, we know there's tons of modalities, but one of the easiest things, is like just to really start to lean on this thing called music. Whether it's sometimes, we get into the functional music side of things, where if I'm really having a hard day and I just need something, like I might go lie down for a moment. I'll go full fledged and type into Spotify or YouTube, like healing frequencies for physical pain, for emotional pain. I can get even more specific for grief,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
for, well, you can get really specific. Type that in to YouTube, to Spotify, to wherever you listen to music. YouTube's pretty good, actually. I'd say they're one of the largest databases, but streaming apps too are great as well. You get usually different stuff on them too. And see what comes up, try some, and then just kind of favorite and like the ones that resonate the most with you. Create a little playlist. And I know I'm probably describing a little bit of the homework you give your clients, Bill, but like essentially that's a great way that you can now start to like tap into these really, really helpful frequencies and pieces of music that you can use in a very, very functional way. And they can do a lot. They can really like even help reprogram the cells in your body, your DNA, all this stuff. So you got that side of it. But then you have the other side where it's like, you have your playlist of sad songs, happy songs, energizing songs. Name a state that you want to be in, and start compiling songs that get you there. And they're going to be different for everybody, of course, right? Different nostalgic feelings, different, all these things. But like, start leaning on music in a way that perhaps you never thought was possible before, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I got to echo that, because the difference between music is, entertainment out there, and music as a tool is that intention.
Yeah.
And once you learn to bring focus to music, uh, watch out,
Mm.
because from that point on, stuff happens. And it's the kind of focus, the all-in focus that you get when you're at a rave or in the middle of a concert,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
when you're just absorbed in the experience. And when you teach yourself how to do that to a place where even remembering a song will trigger that complete engagement, what a beautiful place that is. Because then you have control again, you have agency, and you can say to your emotions that come up, oh my gosh, yes, here you are again, anger, my friend. And here's the music that sounds best for you. And all of a sudden, there's a shift when you bring that focus to it that you don't get if you're just listening to Metallica in the background.
Totally. And now, even on touching on background music, you can still have benefits from background music. Now, there's a
Oh, totally.
difference.
Yeah.
There's such a difference between the two, of course. But when you're not needing that intensive focus, and you've already done that now, and now you're moving on with your day, and you want some background music, again, think about what kind of feeling you want. Now, I might again be like, I just need some, like, today was a hard day, and maybe I went through a lot of heavy emotions, so I want the most soft, like, soothing music, just to kind of like give me a sonic hug, and
Yeah.
just kind of remind me everything's okay. I'll put on like some really soothing, healing, like sound, crystal sound bowls or something going on in the background, and I'll just have that frequency, and I'll after an hour I'll just be like, wow, I am so relaxed right now, and like kind of, and I forget why. It's because the background music is like lulling me into this beautiful.
You've forgotten about everything you were doing and writing and
Completely,
whatever.
and
Gone.
gone. And you know, if that's what you need, then great. Or on the opposite side, like recently or not recently, but a lot of the times I'll love putting on like just classical Spanish guitar or something.
Oh, right.
And
Yes.
and Spanish guitar for me just like, oh, like my soul just yearns for it, and I get transported to Spain or to some of my favorite places I've visited, or places I haven't visited that I'd love to visit, and I feel like I'm time traveling or geographically traveling when I hear that kind of music, and it puts me into a completely other state, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. So again, or just soft classical piano, that's a whole other thing too. So it's like, choose your background music appropriately too, because that makes a difference as well.
This process that you're describing, Chris, is so incredible because all of us, of course, respond differently. But once you find the stuff that dials it in for you, you have a real tool. The other side of that is the process, because you're going to be discovering things that don't work too.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll find very quickly that it's not about whether you like it or not. It's just, oh, well, this isn't resonating for me. It's great music. Like there are times where I want to listen to Queen, but not while I'm falling asleep. Right. And I know that. It's like, okay. But the real plus is that you start to know yourself much better than you ever thought you might. And you realize that sort of nagging headache probably deserves your attention. Not to magnify it in any way, but just because there's some part of you that's calling out for something that you're not giving it. And it may not be music that you give your headache. I don't know what it is, but you become more aware of the subtleties of, the container you write around in and how to care for that beast, in a way that's more aligned with who you are. I always wonder if it's the physical stuff that's I need to align with, or whether there's some consciousness thing that I'm trying to align the physical to. And I realize the impossibility of both of those situations, but it doesn't stop me from being curious, right? And obviously, from our conversations earlier and from a lot of what we know in science these days, what we think is a huge part of what we get. And if you're not getting the results you want, you've got one thing to do, which is change your flipping mind. Right? And music can do that, but it's not just the mind thing. It changes the heart mind, and it changes the brain heart, and it changes the head brain heart, and all of that. So, the practice is so much about becoming aware and so little about really doing anything.
Yep.
Music doesn't require you to do stuff. Maybe you feel like jumping around or dancing or whatever, that's fine. But it's very personal in this way. And the delightful thing, which we got to talk about this, we'll do a whole show on it someday. And remember, we've got to sing a love song, right?
That's right.
Yep, we got to still sing the love song. But the delightful part is what happens when two people start to do these practices together. Wow, does that get cool? Right?
It does. Oh my God. We'll definitely have another episode on that. I've already got some fun stories of even when you're creating music with other individuals and you're locking eyes during that time. A lot of the time you don't always look each other in the eye, but I've been performing with some of these really like highly activated spiritual people, and they're like staring at me, and I'm like, okay, Chris, try to like maintain some eye contact here just to see what happens. And it is trippy.
Isn't that cool?
Oh my gosh. God.
That's how Rebecca and I met.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
In a band. Doing that.
God.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Oh, it's so crazy.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's beautiful love.
Oh, isn't that a great way to connect through music, right?
Yeah. I don't know if there's another. I really don't, because somewhere it's vibrations that connect us, right? And even the vibrations that we can't hear and can't see, there's still like aura vibration stuff going on and heart vibration stuff going on. And like all of that beautiful music that we don't perceive yet, really, is what brings us together. Thank you for listening in on our conversation and for taking time to show your appreciation with a like, share, or subscribe. Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness is a practice of spontaneity, and we welcome your comments, ideas, and questions. There are ways to connect with us in the show notes, So let us hear from you. Until next time, this is Bill Protzman along with Chris Noble wishing you great musical health. Samara Huchaya.